Racist schoolgirls bully paralyzed girl until her billionaire father rushes to the scene, then this happened. What would you do if your child came home from school every day with tears in her eyes, not because of bad grades, but because of the cruelty of other kids? This is not just another high school story. This is the story of Claire Thompson, a 15-year-old girl with chestnut brown hair, soft freckles on her pale skin, and a pair of hazel eyes that always seemed to carry a quiet sadness. Claire wasn't like the other kids at Hawthorne Academy. After a tragic car accident 2 years ago, she lost the ability to walk and had been in a wheelchair ever since. But Claire had something most kids at Hawthorne didn't know about. Her father, Jonathan Thompson, was one of the wealthiest businessmen in the country. He built his empire from scratch and was now the CEO of a billion-dollar tech corporation. Yet, despite their money, Jonathan had raised Claire to be humble, kind, and gentle. But none of that mattered to the girls, who made her life a living nightmare. At the center of Claire's misery was Haley Brooks, the self-proclaimed queen bee of the school. Haley had long blonde hair that shimmered like gold, designer clothes her parents bought her every week, and a cruel smile that could cut through anyone's confidence. Her two closest friends, Jenna and Savannah, were always by her side, ready to laugh at every cruel joke Haley made. Every day, Claire endured their taunts. "Look, here comes Princess Wheels again," Haley would sneer, loud enough for the entire hallway to hear. Jenna would cover her mouth, pretending to whisper but making sure everyone heard, "Do you think she even feels her legs, or does she just sit there all day like a mannequin?" Savannah, the quietest but meanest of the three, always went for the most hurtful words. "Maybe her dad should use some of that money to buy her new legs." "Oh wait, he caw." And every single time, Claire would just lower her head, pretending she didn't hear. But inside she was breaking. That Thursday started like any other. Claire kept to herself, rolling through the halls with her books on her lap. When lunch came, she quietly wheeled herself to the farthest table, away from everyone. But Haley noticed her. "Hey girls," she said with a smirk, "watch this." They strutted over to Claire's table like a pack of lions stalking their prey. "Oops, is this table taken?" Haley asked sweetly, before dropping her designer bag right on Claire's tray, spilling apple juice all over her lap. Jenna laughed so hard she nearly fell over. Savannah joined in, pulling Claire's book off the table and tossing it onto the floor. Claire's face turned bright red as she bent down to try and pick it up, but her wheelchair made it almost impossible to reach. "Oops, guess you can't do that either," Haley mocked, leaning down so close that Claire could smell her perfume. "You should thank me for giving you some entertainment today." That was when Claire snapped. "Why are you doing this to me?" Her voice shook, but it was loud enough for the whole cafeteria to hear. "I've never done anything to you." For a moment there was silence. Then Haley smirked and said, "Because you make it too easy." The entire cafeteria erupted in laughter. Claire's chest tightened, she felt like she couldn't breathe. She left her food, left her book, and rolled herself out of the cafeteria as fast as she could, tears streaming down her face. When Jonathan Thompson came home from a business trip that night, he found Claire in her room, crying into her pillow. "Claire Bear," he said softly, sitting on the edge of her bed, "what's going on?" She didn't answer at first, then, through sobs, she told him everything. Every insult, every cruel laugh, every book that was thrown on the floor. Jonathan's jaw tightened with every word. He was a calm man, always composed, always in control, but tonight something burned in his chest. He pulled Claire into a hug. "Nobody gets to hurt my little girl," he said firmly. And that was when Jonathan made a decision. Tomorrow morning he was going to Hawthorne Academy himself. And this time, the bullies would see that Claire wasn't as alone as they thought. Jonathan put on his finest navy blue suit, the one he wore only for the most important board meetings. He wasn't just coming as a father, he was coming as a man who would not tolerate injustice. As they pulled up to the school in his black Mercedes Maybach, students stopped to stare. They had never seen Claire arrive with her father before. But none of them knew what was about to happen next. Because by the end of that day, the entire school would know exactly who Claire's father was, and why bullying the quiet girl in the wheelchair had been the biggest mistake of their lives. The car door opened and Jonathan Thompson stepped out, his tall frame towering over the other parents in the parking lot. He adjusted his cufflinks and glanced at Claire. You ready for this? He asked softly. Claire nodded, but her hands were trembling. Jonathan placed one hand on her wheelchair handles and pushed her toward the school entrance. Every eye in the parking lot followed them. Jonathan's sharp blue suit, polished shoes, and the quiet authority in his stride made everyone stop and stare. The moment they entered Hawthorne Academy, the receptionist froze. "Good morning, sir," she said nervously. "Can I help you?" "Yes," Jonathan said in a calm, controlled tone that somehow felt more intimidating than if he had shouted. "I'd like to speak with the principal, now." Within minutes, they were seated in Principal Morris's office. Principal Morris, a short, balding man in his late 50s, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Mr. Thompson, I wasn't expecting you," he said, forcing a smile. "What can I do for you today?" Jonathan didn't waste time. "My daughter," he said firmly, gesturing to Claire, "has been bullied for months by 3 girls in this school. Haley Brooks, Jenna Fields, and Savannah Crane. Yesterday, they humiliated her in front of the entire cafeteria, and you will tell me right now what you're going to do about it." The principal swallowed hard. He had dealt with angry parents before, but there was something about Jonathan Thompson, his tone, his posture, his reputation that made this different. "Mr. Thompson," Principal Morris began carefully, "I'm very sorry to hear this. Bullying is something we take very seriously here at Hawthorne." "No," Jonathan cut him off, his voice like steel. "If you took it seriously, my daughter wouldn't have to come home in tears every single day." Claire sat quietly, watching her father defend her with a mix of fear and relief. Principal Morris finally nodded. "I'll have the girls brought to my office immediately." Within 10 minutes, Haley, Jenna, and Savannah walked in, laughing at first. Until they saw who was in the room. Their smiles faded instantly. Jonathan stood up slowly, his broad shoulders blocking the sunlight coming from the window. He didn't need to raise his voice. "Are you the ones who think it's funny to hurt my daughter?" he asked, his piercing blue eyes locked on Haley. Haley swallowed hard, trying to look confident. "We were just joking." "Joking?" Jonathan's tone was icy. "You think it's a joke to humiliate someone who can't even defend herself?" Jenna shifted uncomfortably. Savannah kept her head down. Claire's heart pounded. She had never seen her father like this, calm but so powerful that the air in the room felt heavy. Just then the office door opened, and in walked 3 adults. Haley's mother, Mrs. Brooks, was dressed in a designer pantsuit, her hair perfectly styled. Behind her came Jenna's father and Savannah's stepmother. "What is going on here?" Mrs. Brooks demanded, her voice sharp. Jonathan turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Perfect timing," he said coolly. "We were just talking about how your daughter has been tormenting mine." Mrs. Brooks scoffed. "Tormenting? Haley is one of the most popular girls in school. She wouldn't hurt anyone." "Oh, she would?" Jonathan's lips curled into a bitter smile. "Then why is my daughter terrified to come to school every day?" But before Mrs. Brooks could reply, Principal Morris cleared his throat. "Mr. Thompson," he said hesitantly, "there's something you should know. We've had several complaints about these girls before, but their parents, well, let's just say they have influence in the school board." Jonathan's eyes narrowed. "Are you telling me," he said slowly, "that you've been protecting these girls instead of protecting my daughter?" The room went silent. Claire's chest tightened as she watched her father step closer to the principal's desk. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," Jonathan said, his voice low but dangerous. "By the end of today, I will personally make sure that every single person who allowed this to happen answers for it." Haley's mother looked suddenly pale. Feeling cornered, Haley suddenly snapped. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, tears of anger filling her eyes. "Why does she get to act like the victim all the time? Everyone feels sorry for her just because she's in a wheelchair. Maybe if she wasn't so pathetic, we wouldn't bother her." The room went dead silent. Jonathan's jaw tightened. He turned to Claire, who had tears streaming down her face. Then he turned back to Haley and her parents. "You just proved my point," he said coldly, "and trust me, this ends today." Principal Morris shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Mr. Thompson, perhaps we can arrange a mediation." "No," Jonathan said sharply. "We are beyond mediation. You will suspend these girls effective immediately, and you will issue a public statement to every parent in this school addressing what has been happening here." Mrs. Brooks started to protest, but Jonathan raised a hand. "If you refuse," he said in a voice so calm it sent chills down everyone's spine, "I will personally take this matter to the press, the school board, and every single donor who funds this institution. And trust me, when they find out you allowed a disabled child to be harassed, this school will never recover its reputation." The principal looked trapped. "Fine," he said finally, his shoulders slumping. "The girls are suspended for 2 weeks, effective immediately." Haley gasped, "You can't do that, I have cheerleading tryouts next week." Jonathan didn't even look at her. "You should have thought about that before you laid a hand on my daughter." As Jonathan wheeled Claire out of the office, the entire hallway was quiet. Students peeked from behind lockers, whispering. For the first time in months, Claire felt like she could breathe. But what she didn't know was that this was only the beginning. Because later that night, a shocking discovery about one of the bullies' families would make things even more complicated and put Claire's life in even greater danger. The ride home from Hawthorne Academy was quiet. Claire sat in her wheelchair in the backseat, staring out the window, trying to process everything. She should have felt relieved. After all, the girls were finally suspended, but deep down something felt unfinished. Jonathan glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "You did good today, Claire Bear," he said softly. Claire nodded. "Thanks, Dad, I don't know if this will really stop them." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "Oh, it will, and if it does," his eyes hardened, "then we'll make sure it does." After dinner, Jonathan locked himself in his study. His mind replayed Haley's mother's smug expression. He had seen that look before, at corporate boardrooms, at billion-dollar negotiations. The look of someone who thought they were untouchable. Jonathan didn't like that look. He picked up his phone and called his private investigator, Ethan Cole. "Ethan," Jonathan said, "I want a full background check on the Brooks family. Everything: finances, business dealings, donations. If they have skeletons in their closet, I want to know about it." Ethan hesitated. "This about the bullying situation?" "Yes," Jonathan said, his voice like ice. "If they think money and power give them the right to terrorize my daughter, I'll show them what real power looks like." By midnight, Ethan called back. "Jonathan, you're going to want to sit down for this," Ethan said grimly. "I'm already sitting," Jonathan replied. "What did you find?" "The Brooks family business, Brooks Realty, is on the verge of bankruptcy," Ethan said. "They've been funneling school donations to keep up appearances and maintain influence. If this goes public, they'll lose everything: their reputation, their social standing, maybe even their house." Jonathan sat back in his leather chair, his mind racing. So that was it. That was why Mrs. Brooks had fought so hard to protect Haley's image. But before Jonathan could respond, Ethan added something that made his blood run cold. "There's more. I traced some of their recent transactions. Jonathan, they've been bribing school officials to bury bullying complaints. Yours isn't the first case they've tried to make disappear." Jonathan's hand clenched into a fist. "They're paying the school to cover up what their daughter is doing," he said slowly. "Yes," Ethan confirmed, "and if I'm right, Principal Morris knew about it." Jonathan's face darkened. "This just became bigger than a suspension," he muttered. The next morning, Jonathan received an email, an anonymous message that made his stomach drop. "Back off or your daughter won't be safe." Attached was a blurry photo of Claire leaving school the day before. Jonathan's pulse quickened, his protective instincts kicked into overdrive. He forwarded the email to Ethan immediately. "Trace it," Jonathan ordered. "Find out who sent this." Ethan's voice was tense. "Jonathan, this is getting dangerous if someone's threatening Claire." "Then I'm coming for them," Jonathan interrupted. His tone was sharp, final. "No one, and I mean no one, threatens my little girl." Meanwhile, Claire was having trouble sleeping. She kept hearing Haley's words in her head. Maybe if she wasn't so pathetic, we wouldn't bother her. That night, she had a nightmare. She dreamt she was back in the cafeteria, surrounded by laughter, unable to move. Haley's face loomed over her, distorted and cruel. When she woke up, she was sweating. She wheeled herself to her father's study. "Dad," she said softly, peeking in. Jonathan looked up from his laptop. "Claire Bear, what's wrong?" She hesitated, I don't want to go back to school, not if they're still out there. Jonathan's heart ached as he looked at his daughter's frightened face. You won't have to face them alone, he said gently. I promise you I'll keep you safe, whatever it takes. The next day, Jonathan called a meeting with the school board not to complain but to expose. When Principal Morris saw Jonathan walk in with a thick folder of documents, his face went pale. What is this? He asked nervously. Proof, Jonathan said coldly, placing the folder on the table. Proof that members of this school have been accepting money to cover up bullying complaints. Proof that certain families think they can buy immunity while my daughter suffers. Either you deal with this corruption today, Jonathan continued, or I will take this file to the press tomorrow morning, and trust me, they will eat this story alive. The room went silent. The board members exchanged anxious glances. Principal Morris wiped sweat from his brow. For the first time, it wasn't just about Claire. This was about tearing down a system that allowed this to happen in the first place. But Jonathan didn't know that outside the school, Haley and Jenna were watching from a distance, and they weren't planning to just accept their punishment quietly. Haley's face was twisted with anger. He thinks he can ruin my family, she hissed. He has no idea who he's messing with. Savannah nodded silently, her face pale. And just like that, the bullies decided to take things into their own hands, setting in motion a plan that would put Claire in even greater danger. Claire didn't notice the dark SUV parked near the school gates that afternoon. She was too busy trying to keep her head down, hoping no one would laugh at her as she wheeled herself toward the exit. But inside that SUV, Haley, Jenna, and Savannah were huddled together, whispering. This is insane, Savannah muttered, glancing nervously out the window. We've already been suspended, why can't we just let this go? Because he humiliated us, Haley snapped. My mom cried all night because of that man, he's ruining our family name. If Claire had just kept her mouth shut, none of this would have happened. Jenna smirked, so what's the plan? Haley's eyes hardened. We scare her, she said coldly. We make her so afraid she'll beg her father to leave the school, maybe even the whole town. Savannah bit her lip. Haley, are you sure? What if this goes too far? It won't, Haley said. We're not going to hurt her, just send her a message. But Haley's idea of a message was far from harmless. The next day, Claire stayed after school for her therapy session. When she finally left, the parking lot was nearly empty. As she wheeled herself toward her father's car, she noticed something strange. Her wheelchair felt loose. Before she could process it, the right wheel jerked violently and Claire's entire chair tipped sideways, throwing her to the ground. She gasped in pain as her hands scraped against the pavement. Just then, she heard it, muffled laughter coming from behind a nearby car. Claire's head whipped around. Haley stood there smiling cruelly, phone in hand as if recording. Oops, Haley said, feigning innocence. Looks like someone forgot to tighten their wheels. Jenna giggled, maybe she should just crawl home. Claire's eyes burned with tears. What do you want from me? She cried. Haley stepped closer, her shadow falling over Claire. For you to disappear, Haley said in a low voice. Tell your dad to back off or next time we won't just loosen the screws. Savannah looked horrified. Haley. Come on, Haley hissed, grabbing Savannah's arm. We're done here. The three of them ran off, leaving Claire on the ground, shaking. When Jonathan arrived minutes later and saw Claire on the pavement, his heart nearly stopped. Claire, he shouted, rushing to her side. She was crying uncontrollably as he lifted her back into her chair. They were here, Claire sobbed. They messed with my wheelchair. Jonathan's face turned to stone. Who? He demanded. Haley, Claire whispered. Jonathan's hands clenched into fists. This wasn't bullying anymore, this was an assault. That evening, Jonathan contacted the local police department. Detective Harris, a tall woman with sharp eyes, came to their home. Mr. Thompson, she said, flipping open her notebook, we've had complaints about bullying at Hawthorne Academy before, but tampering with a wheelchair, that's a criminal offense. Claire nodded quietly, still shaken. We'll pull the security footage from the school parking lot, Harris continued. If we catch these girls on camera, we can press charges. Jonathan exhaled slowly, his jaw tight. Detective, he said quietly, whoever threatened my daughter sent me an email yesterday. I need you to find out who's behind it. Harris nodded. We'll get our cyber unit on it. Across town, Haley's parents were having their own crisis. You did what? Mrs. Brooks yelled, glaring at Haley. It wasn't a big deal, Haley protested. I just loosened the screws. Haley, do you have any idea what you've done? Her father shouted. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. If the Thompsons press charges, we could lose everything. Mrs. Brooks grabbed her phone. We need to fix this before it destroys us, she muttered. But it was already too late. That night, Ethan called Jonathan with the results of his investigation. Jonathan, we traced the threatening email, Ethan said. It came from a private server registered to Brooks Realty. Jonathan's eyes narrowed. They threatened my daughter using their own company's server. Looks like it, Ethan confirmed. I have the digital fingerprints. This is solid evidence. Jonathan's lips curled into a grim smile. Then it's time to end this, he said. Jonathan decided not to wait for the police to act. He arranged a meeting with Mrs. Brooks at a quiet upscale cafe the next morning. When she arrived, looking flustered and defensive, Jonathan slid a folder across the table. What is this? She asked warily. Proof, Jonathan said flatly. Proof that your family sent threats to my daughter, proof that your daughter sabotaged her wheelchair, and proof that you paid this school to cover up complaints. Mrs. Brooks froze. You have two options, Jonathan continued. One, I take this to the police, the press, and every single person who still respects your family name. Or two, you and your daughter issue a public apology, withdraw from Hawthorne Academy, and never go near my daughter again. Mrs. Brooks's face went pale. You would. Jonathan leaned forward, his eyes ice cold. Try me. Mrs. Brooks left the cafe shaken, but she wasn't ready to give up. Later that night, Haley stood in her bedroom, tears of rage streaming down her face. No way are we running away like cowards, she muttered to Jenna on the phone. If my mom won't fight, then I will. And this time, Haley said, her voice trembling with anger, I'll make sure Claire doesn't get up again. The weekend passed in uneasy silence. Claire barely left her room while Jonathan spent hours on the phone with lawyers and investigators. But on Monday morning, Claire insisted on going back to school. Dad, I can't hide forever, she said quietly as he wheeled her to the car. If I stay home, it means they win. Jonathan hesitated, then nodded. All right, he said, but I'm coming with you. Claire smiled faintly. You're really going to sit in class with me? Jonathan's lips curved into the first smile she'd seen in days. Not exactly, but I'll be close. When they arrived at Hawthorne Academy, Jonathan didn't leave after dropping Claire off. Instead, he parked in a corner of the lot where he could see the entrance. Ethan's warning echoed in his mind. If Haley feels cornered, she might lash out again. Jonathan wasn't about to take any chances. Meanwhile, Haley stood near the back of the school, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Are you sure about this? Jenna whispered. Yes, Haley hissed. She humiliated us. My family's name is ruined because of her. I just want to scare her one last time so bad she never comes back here. Savannah shook her head. Haley, this is getting out of control if we get caught. Then we make sure we don't get caught, Haley snapped. From her bag, she pulled out a water bottle filled with soda, but not just soda. I put oil on the hallway floor near the back stairwell, Haley whispered. When she comes through, her chair will slip. She'll fall just like last time, maybe break something, then she'll know not to mess with me. Savannah gasped. That could seriously hurt her. That's the point, Haley said coldly. After class, Claire wheeled toward the back hallway where her driver usually waited. But something felt off. The hallway was empty, too empty. Suddenly she heard a whisper. Hey, Wheels. Claire froze. Haley stepped out of the shadows, Jenna right behind her. Savannah lingered near the exit, biting her lip nervously. What do you want? Claire asked, her voice shaking. To finish what we started, Haley said with a chilling smile. Before Claire could move, Jenna kicked her backpack out of her lap, books scattered across the floor. Oops, Jenna said mockingly, clumsy you. Claire's heart raced, she reached for her phone but Haley snatched it from her hand. You're not calling Daddy this time, Haley sneered. Then she wheeled Claire's chair closer to the slick patch of floor. Let's see how fast you can roll now. Just as Haley shoved Claire's chair toward the oil-slicked floor, a voice thundered from the end of the hallway. "Stop!" Haley spun around and froze. Jonathan was running down the hallway, his footsteps echoing like thunder. "Get away from my daughters." For a split second, Haley hesitated, then tried to push the chair anyway. But Jonathan reached them first. He grabbed the chair just before it hit the slick spot, spinning it out of harm's way. "Are you out of your mind?" he roared, towering over Haley and Jenna. Haley's face went pale. You were just what?" Jonathan's voice was like a whip, about to throw my daughter down a flight of stairs. The hallway was dead silent, even Savannah looked terrified. Within minutes, Detective Harris arrived. Apparently Jonathan had called her earlier that morning, just in case. When she saw the oil on the floor, her expression hardened. "This isn't bullying anymore," Harris said flatly. "This is attempted assault." Haley's face crumpled. "You can't arrest me," she cried. "Oh, I can," Harris replied, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. Jenna tried to run, but another officer caught her. Savannah raised her hands. "I didn't touch her," she cried. "You're still coming with us," Harris said. "You all had a part in this." As the officers led the girls away, Claire finally broke down. "I just wanted them to leave me alone," she sobbed. Jonathan knelt in front of her and held her hands. "They will," he said gently. "I promise you, Claire Bear, this ends today." But even as he said it, Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Mrs. Brooks was not going to let her daughter go to juvenile detention quietly. And somewhere deep down, Jonathan knew that the Brooks family would do everything in their power to fight back, even if it meant coming after him. The arrest of Haley, Jenna, and Savannah sent shockwaves through Hawthorne Academy. By the next morning, everyone was talking about it. Some students whispered that Claire's billionaire dad had overreacted. Others said Haley had finally gotten what she deserved. But the Brooks family was furious. Mrs. Brooks stormed into the police station that morning, her high heels clicking against the tiled floor. "You have no right to keep my daughter here," she shouted. Detective Harris remained calm. "Ma'am, we have surveillance footage of your daughter tampering with Claire Thompson's wheelchair last week and a fresh recording of her attempting to push her toward the stairwell yesterday. Your daughter is being charged with reckless endangerment and assault." Mrs. Brooks's face turned pale, but her anger didn't fade. "You think you can destroy my daughter's life?" she hissed. "I'll make sure Jonathan Thompson regrets this." A week later, the case made its way to juvenile court. Jonathan arrived in a charcoal gray suit, his presence commanding. Claire sat beside him, nervous but determined to see justice done. Haley walked in with her parents, dressed in a modest navy blue dress that made her look younger, almost innocent. But her eyes were still full of defiance. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Keller, called the court to order. "The charges brought against Haley Brooks, Jenna Fields, and Savannah Crane are serious," Judge Keller said. "We will hear evidence from both sides." Jonathan's attorney, a sharp-tongued woman named Monica Graves, presented the case first. "Your Honor," Monica began, "we have video footage, witness testimony, and digital evidence of threats made against Claire Thompson. These girls engaged in a pattern of harassment that escalated to physical danger. My client's daughter was nearly killed because of their actions." She handed over a USB drive containing the security footage. The courtroom was silent as the video played. Haley's face paled as she watched herself on screen, laughing as she loosened Claire's wheelchair bolts. Jonathan glanced at Claire, who gripped his hand tightly. But then it was the defense attorney's turn. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "while my clients admit to unkind behavior, they were children acting out. We believe Mr. Thompson is using his wealth and influence to escalate this matter unnecessarily. In fact," the attorney added, "we have reason to believe Mr. Thompson offered money to Principal Morris to have these girls expelled before going to the police. This entire case is nothing more than a vendetta." Jonathan's head snapped toward the defense table. "That's a lie," he said sharply. But the defense attorney smiled. "Then perhaps Mr. Thompson can explain this." He held up a document, an email Jonathan had sent to Principal Morris threatening to pull his company's donations if action wasn't taken. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Jonathan's lawyer stood, That was not bribery, Your Honor. It was a warning that my client would not support a school that condones bullying. Judge Keller held up her hand. Both sides will be heard, but this does raise questions about motive. Jonathan clenched his jaw. This was turning into a public trial for him instead of Haley. When it was time for witnesses, Claire nervously rolled to the stand. Her voice trembled at first, but she told the court everything, from the cafeteria humiliation to the email threats to the moment Haley shoved her chair toward the slick floor. When she was done, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even Savannah was crying quietly at the defense table. Just when it seemed the case was going in their favor, Principal Morris was called to testify. Jonathan expected him to back their story. After all, the principal had seen the evidence himself. But to Jonathan's shock, Morris claimed under oath that Jonathan had pressured him to act against the girls to protect his company's image. That's not true, Jonathan shot up from his seat. Sit down, Mr. Thompson, Judge Keller said sharply. Monica whispered urgently, we can impeach his testimony, but this complicates things. The defense will use this to argue you abused your power. Jonathan felt rage building in his chest. Morris had sold them out, probably under pressure from the Brooks family, who still held influence with the school board. By the end of the hearing, Judge Keller announced her decision would be delivered in 2 days. Until then, she said, the girls are under house arrest. And Mr. Thompson, I advise you to refrain from any further interference with school officials. Jonathan's fists clenched. They were trying to make him the villain. That night, Jonathan got a call from Ethan. You were right, Ethan said grimly. Morris was paid off. I traced a large deposit from Brooks Realty to his personal account 2 days ago. They bought his testimony. Jonathan's face hardened. They want a war, he said coldly, then they're going to get one. But while Jonathan was preparing for the next battle, Haley sat in her room, staring at the ceiling. She wasn't afraid of jail. She was afraid of losing everything, her friends, her reputation, her future. And that fear was turning into something darker. She's not going to win, Haley whispered to herself, even if it's the last thing I do. Jonathan didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study, scrolling through financial records Ethan had dug up. The evidence of bribery was clear. The Brooks family had transferred $75,000 to Principal Morris's account just days before his testimony. But evidence wasn't enough anymore. They had crossed the line, and Jonathan was done playing defense. Ethan, Jonathan said as dawn broke, prepare the press statement. If the court can't deliver justice, I will. Ethan hesitated. You're going public. Yes, Jonathan said firmly. We'll expose the bribery, the cover-up, the school's failure. Everyone will know what happened to Claire. But just as Ethan was about to leave, Claire rolled into the room. Dad, she said softly. Jonathan turned, his face softening. Sweetheart, you should be resting. I don't want you to fight like this, Claire said, her voice trembling. If you go public, it's just going to make everything worse. People already think we're using money to get revenge. Jonathan knelt beside her wheelchair. Claire, this isn't just about us anymore, it's about making sure they can't hurt anyone else. Claire bit her lip. She knew he was right, but a strange feeling of dread settled in her stomach, like something bad was about to happen. That afternoon, Claire insisted on going out for fresh air. Jonathan reluctantly agreed, sending Ethan with her. They headed to the quiet park near the Thompson estate, a place Claire loved because it had wide, smooth paths perfect for her chair. But halfway through their walk, Ethan's phone buzzed. Stay here, he said, I need to take this call. Claire nodded, rolling her chair toward the pond while Ethan stepped aside. And that's when it happened. A black SUV screeched to a halt near the park entrance. Claire frowned. There were no other cars around. 2 figures in hoodies jumped out, moving fast. Hey, Claire shouted, what are you doing? They didn't answer. One of them grabbed the handles of her wheelchair, spinning it around. Let go, Claire screamed, panic flooding her chest. The second figure reached into his pocket, pulling out something that glinted in the sun, a zip tie. Before they could drag her toward the SUV, Ethan came sprinting back. Hey, he roared, charging like a linebacker. He slammed into the first attacker, knocking him to the ground. The second one swung wildly, but Ethan dodged and landed a hard punch to his jaw. The man stumbled back, clutching his face. Run, Ethan barked at Claire, but she couldn't run. She could only spin her chair frantically toward the open path. The attackers scrambled back to their SUV and sped off before Ethan could grab them. By the time police arrived, Claire was shaking violently. "They tried to take me," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Ethan put a hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now, I promise you, Claire, nobody's ever getting that close again." Jonathan arrived minutes later, his face pale with fury. "Who did this?" he demanded. Ethan explained, giving a description of the SUV. Jonathan turned to the police. "I want every traffic camera in this city checked. I want that vehicle found." Later that night, Jonathan got a call from Detective Harris. "We traced the SUV," Harris said grimly. "It's registered to a shell company owned by Brooks Realty." Jonathan's blood ran cold. This wasn't just bullying anymore. This was an attack. Meanwhile, Haley sat in her bedroom, packing like a caged animal. "You hired those guys, didn't you?" Savannah whispered, horrified. Haley turned sharply. "I didn't tell them to hurt her, just scare her, make her too afraid to come to court." Savannah backed away. "This has gone too far, Haley, if they find out it was you." "Then they won't," Haley snapped, "because you're not going to say a word." But deep down, even Haley knew the walls were closing in. That night, Jonathan stood on the balcony of his mansion, staring out over the city. Ethan joined him quietly. "You're going to do it, aren't you?" Ethan said. Jonathan nodded. "Release the evidence," he said coldly. "All of it. Tomorrow morning, the world is going to know who the Brooks family really is." The next morning, the entire town woke up to headlines that shook Hawthorne Academy to its core. Billionaire EXPOSES school cover-up, principal TAKES bribe to protect bullies. Jonathan Thompson had gone public. The evidence he released wasn't just damning, it was devastating. Screenshots of the $75,000 wire transfer from Brooks Realty to Principal Morris. Internal emails showing the principal stalling disciplinary action despite multiple complaints. Video footage of Haley and her friends laughing after Claire's near fall. Within hours, the story was on every local news station and trending online. Camera crews camped outside the Brooks mansion. Reporters shouted questions as Mr. Brooks tried to leave for work. "Did you bribe the principal to protect your daughter? Are you involved in the attempted kidnapping of Claire Thompson? Do you think your daughter should face jail time?" Mr. Brooks slammed the car door and sped off without answering. Haley stayed locked in her room, scrolling through social media. Everywhere she looked, her name was there on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. Justice for Claire was trending. Her DMs were full of strangers telling her she was a monster. She slammed her phone down and screamed into her pillow. Hawthorne Academy was in complete disarray. Students filmed videos in the hallways, giving their opinions about the case. "Honestly, Haley always acted like she owned this place," one boy said in a TikTok video that quickly went viral. "Claire deserves justice," another girl said tearfully. "What happened to her could have happened to anyone." Parents began pulling their children out of school, demanding the principal resign. Under massive pressure, Principal Morris was forced to step down that afternoon. Inside the Brooks mansion, things were no better. Mr. Brooks paced the living room, phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what it costs, fix this," he barked. Mrs. Brooks sat on the couch crying. "Haley's future is ruined," she sobbed. "College admissions are going to see all of this." Haley stormed downstairs, her face red and blotchy. "Stop talking about me like I'm not here," she shouted. "Do you even care that I'm the one everyone hates?" Mrs. Brooks tried to hug her, but Haley shoved her away. "This is your fault," Haley screamed. "You told Dad to pay off Morris instead of just apologizing to Claire. We could have made this go away quietly, but now look at us." For the first time, Mrs. Brooks didn't have an answer. 2 days later, the courtroom was packed. This time, the energy was different. The public had already decided who the villains were. Jonathan sat calmly beside Claire, knowing the momentum was finally on their side. When the judge entered, she announced, "New evidence has been submitted: financial transactions linking Brooks Realty to Principal Morris, and a traffic camera video placing a Brooks Realty vehicle near the scene of the attempted abduction." A gasp went through the courtroom. Haley's face went white. The defense attorney scrambled to object, but Judge Keller silenced him. "These are serious allegations," she said. "Given this new evidence, this case may escalate beyond juvenile court." Mr. Brooks jumped to his feet. "Your Honor, this is outrageous." But the judge banged her gavel. "Sit down, Mr. Brooks, or I will hold you in contempt." When the court recessed, Haley ran to the bathroom, her hands shaking. Savannah followed her, whispering urgently. "Haley, you have to tell them it wasn't your idea. You have to." "Shut up," Haley shouted, tears streaming down her face. She gripped the edge of the sink so hard her knuckles turned white. For the first time, the full weight of what she had done crashed over her. Claire's face, the wheelchair, the screams. The park, the SUV. She slid down to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Savannah knelt beside her. "It's not too late, Haley, you can still make it right." Haley didn't answer. But for the first time, she started to wonder if Savannah was right. That night, Jonathan called a press conference. Claire sat beside him, her voice steady as she spoke directly to the cameras. "I don't want revenge," she said softly. "I just want to feel safe at school again, and I want every kid like me, disabled or different, to know that they matter." The clip went viral within hours, drawing sympathy from across the country. Jonathan looked at his daughter proudly. "You did good, kid," he whispered. But deep down, he knew the fight wasn't over. The courtroom was silent the next morning. This was it, the final day of hearings. Claire sat in her chair, hands folded neatly on her lap, looking calm but tired. Weeks of stress had worn her down, but there was a quiet strength in her eyes. Jonathan stood beside her, his presence commanding but steady. Across the room, Haley sat hunched over, her once pristine posture gone. Her parents whispered furiously with their attorney, their faces pale. The Brooks family had been dragged through the mud for days: media pressure, financial scrutiny, online backlash. But what came next would change everything. When it was time for closing statements, Haley suddenly stood. "Your Honor," she said, her voice shaky. Judge Keller raised an eyebrow. "Miss Brooks." Haley's attorney tried to pull her back down, but she shook him off. "I have something to say." The entire courtroom turned to watch as Haley walked to the witness stand. She took a deep breath, tears already streaming down her face. "I did it," she said quietly. "Everything they said I did it. I bullied Claire, I tampered with her wheelchair, and I told those guys to scare her so she wouldn't come to court." Gasps rippled through the room. Mrs. Brooks buried her face in her hands. "I thought it was just a joke," Haley continued, her voice breaking. "I didn't think it would go this far. I didn't think about how scared she must have been. I just didn't want to lose my friends or look weak." She turned to Claire, sobbing openly now. "I'm sorry, I know that doesn't fix what I did, but I am so sorry." Jonathan stood, his expression unreadable. He walked slowly to the front of the courtroom. For a moment, everyone held their breath, waiting for him to speak. When he finally did, his voice was calm but cold. "You nearly killed my daughter," Jonathan said. "You terrorized her, humiliated her, and then tried to silence her with fear." Haley flinched. "But," Jonathan added after a long pause, "I believe in accountability and redemption. I don't want to destroy your future, Haley. I just want you to take responsibility for what you did." He turned to the judge. "My family is willing to drop the civil lawsuit if Haley and her family agree to a formal apology, restitution for damages, and community service involving disability awareness programs." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Keller considered this for a long moment. "Ms. Brooks," she said finally, "your actions were dangerous and could have had tragic consequences, but your confession and Mr. Thompson's request for restorative justice carry weight." She banged her gavel. "This court sentences you to 300 hours of community service at a rehabilitation center. Mandatory counseling sessions. Restitution for Claire Thompson's medical and emotional damages." And the judge added firmly, "A written and verbal public apology at Hawthorne Academy." A week later, the entire school gathered in the auditorium. Haley stood on stage, hands trembling as she held the microphone. "I bullied Claire," she said clearly, "and it was wrong. I hurt her because she was different, and that makes me a coward. I can't undo what I did, but I will spend every day trying to be better." The auditorium was silent for a moment, and then a single clap echoed from the back. It was Claire. She smiled softly and nodded. Haley's tears flowed freely. Months later, Claire rolled through the halls of Hawthorne Academy with a confidence no one had seen before. Students greeted her warmly, some stopping to chat or offer help. Haley passed by carrying a box of flyers for the school's new anti-bullying campaign, a program she had personally helped start as part of her community service. Their eyes met. For a moment there was silence. Then Claire nodded. "Good job," she said softly. Haley smiled faintly. "Thanks." It wasn't friendship, not yet. But it was the first step toward something better. That evening, Jonathan sat on the porch with Claire, watching the sunset. "You proud of yourself, kid?" he asked. Claire smiled. "Yeah, I think Mom would have been proud too." Jonathan put his arm around her shoulders. "She would have," he said quietly. And for the first time in a long time, Claire felt safe.